Imagine stepping into your office on a Monday morning, like you're grabbing your coffee, and you find out the person designing your company's new corporate wellness program is a former cartel smuggler.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would definitely wake you up.
Right. Or, the executive overseeing your entire accounting department just spent over a year in a federal penitentiary for money laundering.
I mean, in a normal corporate setting, you'd probably just throw those resumes straight into the trash immediately.
Exactly. But what if that wellness director was Tim Allen? Like the beloved voice of Buzz Lightyear.
That is wild to think about.
And what if that accountant was the person who actually inspired Orange is the New Black? Today, we're doing a deep dive into the massive, often totally invisible gap between a polished public persona and the cold, hard data of a criminal background check.
And, the contrast between those two things, the character someone projects versus the historical reality they actually carry, that is the entire foundation of risk assessment.
Because we're basically wired to trust a shiny surface.
Yeah. Totally. We are naturally wired that way. We see the wealth, the box office numbers, the flawless talk show interviews, and we just assume we have the full picture. But the raw data tells a completely different story, one that's driven by liability rather than, PR.
Which brings us perfectly to our source material for today's deep dive. We are unpacking this absolutely fascinating report compiled by BChex.
Right, the background screening company.
Yeah, exactly. They specialize in comprehensive background screening and continuous safety monitoring for everyday businesses. And they basically decided to bypass the Hollywood spin and look straight at the raw data.
Which is such an interesting exercise.
It really is. Their list is titled 10 Celebrities You'd Be Surprised Have a Criminal Record. And what makes this specific list so compelling is that BChex ignored all the obvious names. Like, there's no O.J. Simpson or Martha Stewart here.
Right, because we already know about them.
Exactly. They focused entirely on individuals whose current, pristine brands completely camouflage some truly staggering histories.
Well, and the core thesis BChex is putting forward here is really about competing ecosystems. I mean, the entertainment industry evaluates risk through a completely different matrix than the rest of the professional world.
How so? Like, they just don't care.
It's more that a film studio or a record label will frequently just suppress or completely ignore extreme behavioral red flags, provided the talent in question can generate massive audience revenue.
Ah, so that's a math equation.
Exactly. The box office return mathematically offsets the liability, but everyday companies, whether it's a tech startup or a regional bank, they just operate without that luxury.
Because they can't afford the hit.
Right. For them, a single unvetted hire bringing hidden volatility into the workplace can result in catastrophic commercial and reputational damage.
So as we dive into these files, I want you, the listener, to put on the hat of a corporate hiring manager. Imagine you're sitting at your desk, and these celebrity rap sheets are literal background reports landing in your inbox for a potential new hire.
That's a great way to frame it.
Let's look at how Hollywood handles these red flags versus how a corporate compliance department would, starting with the mechanics of the Hollywood double standard.
And that standard is a mechanism built almost entirely on the concept of bankability. I mean, if an individual is deemed a high enough asset, early career violence or serious transgressions aren't just forgiven, they're actively scrubbed from the narrative.
Will Smith is the perfect case study for this.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, everyone knows about the Chris Rock slap at the Oscars.
Right, of course.
But the BChex article points out an incident from his early days as a rapper that completely shifts how you view his background. Long before he was a universally beloved movie star, Smith actually instructed his bodyguard to beat up a record promoter named William Hendrix.
That is a major incident.
Yeah, and the charges were ultimately dropped. And miraculously, just a year later, Smith lands the lead role on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which, skyrockets him to global superstardom.
Let's break down the mechanics of a drop charge, though, because from an employer's perspective, this is a critical data point.
Okay, lay it on me.
A drop charge means legal clearance, obviously,
Huh.
but a background screening company like BChex doesn't just look for convictions. They look for behavioral indicators.
Right, the pattern.
Exactly. And instructing an employee to physically assault someone, that is directed, calculated violence.
Wait, I want to push back on that for a second. If the legal system drops the charges, isn't he technically innocent in the eyes of the law? Like, why would a corporate hiring manager even be allowed to care about a drop charge? Doesn't that border on penalizing someone for something they weren't convicted of?
It's a fair question, but it really comes down to civil liability versus criminal guilt. I mean, an HR department isn't trying to put someone in jail, right?
Yeah, true.
They are just trying to determine if bringing this person into an office creates an unsafe environment for the other employees. So, if a background investigation uncovers credible police reports of directed violence, even without a conviction, a standard corporate risk matrix flags that as a potential volatility threat.
Wow, okay, I see the distinction.
Yeah, but the studio system, on the other hand, looked at that exact same data point and decided the demographic reach of the Fresh Prince simply outweighed the behavioral risk.
That is a wild calculation.
Yeah.
It essentially means that if your box office potential is high enough, your resume becomes Teflon. Like, the revenue grease just washes the criminal record away.
That's exactly what it does.
But let's scale this up, because we are moving from a single drop charge to some of the most massive, highly visible criminal histories in Hollywood. We're talking about backgrounds that preceded the most extreme career turnarounds we've ever seen. Let's unpack the raw data on Mark Wahlberg.
His trajectory is honestly one of the most drastic pivots on the entire B-Checks list.
To say the least. I mean, today he's this massive action star and comedy lead, but the article details his Marky Mark days growing up in Boston, and the data is dark.
Very dark.
He was addicted to cocaine by the age of 13, he drops out of school at 14, and that kicks off a series of drug-induced rampages.
And it escalated severely.
Yeah, he was ultimately charged with attempted murder. He received a 2-year prison sentence, though he actually only served 45 days before reinventing his entire life.
Which is an incredibly short stint for that kind of charge.
Right. And then right next to him on this list is Robert Downey Jr., whose background is arguably even heavier.
Downey Jr.'s file is particularly complex, mostly because of how early the exposure began. The source notes that his own father, a film producer, actually exposed him to drugs when he was just a child.
It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And it led to a decade-long involvement in illegal drug activities.
The specific arrest, detailed from 1996, is staggering. He was pulled over for drunk driving, and police found cocaine, heroin, crack, and a Magnum revolver in his vehicle.
Magnum revolver, yeah.
He eventually served time, got entirely sober in 2003, and built a monumental career, becoming globally recognized as Iron Man.
A massive redemption story.
Exactly. But here is my question for you and for the listener. We love this narrative. We eat up the movie star redemption arc. But if a B-Check screening flags attempted murder or heroin and a Magnum revolver for like a mid-level management position, that application goes straight into the shredder.
Oh, absolutely. Immediately.
So why does the public champion a redemption arc on the big screen but categorically reject it for the cubicle next door?
Well, because of the fundamental difference between consuming a product and sharing an environment.
Say more about that.
When the public champions the Iron Man redemption arc, they are interacting with a highly produced fictional facade. The audience doesn't have to manage the historical risk, they just buy a ticket.
Right, they get to go home after 2 hours.
Exactly. But a corporate hiring manager is tasked with protecting a physical workplace. An algorithmic background check doesn't weigh charisma. It weighs the statistical probability of a relapse or a violent incident.
Which makes sense when you put it like that.
Yeah, I mean, bringing a Magnum revolver and a cocktail of hard narcotics into a corporate ecosystem is a liability nightmare that no standard business insurance policy will cover.
So the background check basically pierces the fictional character and forces the employer to deal with the historical human.
Precisely.
That perfectly sets up our next category. Because if Wahlberg and Downey Jr. were known bad boys who eventually made good, this next group is the absolute inverse. These are the squeaky clean shockers.
Oh, these are fascinating.
We're talking about family-friendly, universally trusted brands masking incredibly heavy federal crimes.
This is where the concept of the facade becomes truly jarring.
Jarring is putting it lightly. Let's look at Tim Allen. I mean, he is literally the voice of Toy Story. He's the star of the Santa Claus.
You can't get more family-friendly than that.
You really can't. But in 1978, when he was working as a stand-up comic, he was arrested in an airport drug bust. He had more than a pound of cocaine in his luggage.
A pound is a massive amount.
Yeah, and he was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. He ended up serving 2.5 years, and the only reason his sentence was reduced was because he provided police with information on other members of the drug trafficking ring.
Right, he cooperated.
He did have a later stop for drunk driving in 1997, but that 1978 federal trafficking charge is monumental.
It's a massive data point, and the mechanism of how he reduced his sentence is highly scrutinized in corporate vetting.
But wait, I want to dig into that specific mechanism. If a candidate gave up other traffickers to the police, does a corporate background check view that as a positive? Like, hey, you cooperated with authorities, he's learning from his mistakes?
No, not at all.
Or does it just cement him as a massive liability?
It absolutely cements the liability. From a corporate compliance standpoint, the act of informing on a cartel does not erase the fact that the candidate was deeply embedded in an organized criminal enterprise to begin with.
Oh, I see.
HR algorithms flag the proximity to severe criminal networks. The cooperation might reduce federal prison time, but it certainly doesn't reduce the corporate risk matrix.
That makes total sense.
Uh-huh.
The liability is the network itself. And speaking of federal networks, the article brings us to Piper Kerman.
This is a really unique file.
It really is. Her story involves getting romantically entangled with a heroin dealer, which led directly to a 1998 indictment for money laundering. She served 13 months at a minimum security prison in Danbury, Connecticut, beginning in 2004.
And what is so unique about Kerman's file is how the crime itself was eventually synthesized into her professional resume.
Yes, exactly. That 13-month stint in a correctional facility is what birthed her memoir, which turned into the massive television hit Orange is the New Black.
It's incredible.
She literally transformed a federal money laundering conviction into a highly successful media career, and she now speaks on behalf of women in corrections. I mean, it's finding out the foundation of a sleek corporate skyscraper is made entirely out of recycled prison bars.
Which perfectly illustrates the B-Check's warning about relying on surface-level brands. You look at Tim Allen voicing an animated astronaut or Piper Kerman operating as a successful author, and there is absolutely zero visible trace of international drug trafficking or federal money laundering.
Just completely invisible to the consumer.
Right. A comprehensive background check is often the only tool an organization has to strip away that current, highly polished reality and reveal the historical facts underneath.
It really highlights how blind an employer is without that underlying data. But let's shift our focus a bit. We've been discussing heavy narcotics, violence, and federal money laundering. The B-Checks article also highlights a completely different type of red flag.
A more behavioral one.
Yeah, we can categorize this group as the rules don't apply to me crowd. This is where we see a persistent, documented pattern of ignoring foundational rules. Let's start with a figure who projects the ultimate image of an analytical, structured professional, Bill Gates.
The tech titan himself. He is a fascinating inclusion here because his offenses seem minor in isolation, but they reveal a very specific behavioral pattern.
The article outlines his early rebellious streak. Like, his thrill was fast driving and flat-out ignoring traffic laws. In his teens, he was caught speeding and driving without a license.
Okay, teenage rebellion, pretty standard.
Right, but then in 1975, he was flagged for disobeying stop signs. And the detail that really jumps out is that he repeated this exact same behavior after he founded Microsoft.
He was a CEO at that point.
Exactly. He was arrested again for driving without a license, speeding, and blowing through stop signs.
This is where the concept of continuous safety monitoring comes into play. I mean, traditional background checks are static. You know, they take a snapshot of a person at the very moment of hire. But continuous monitoring is dynamic. It actively watches for new violations over time.
And that dynamic monitoring would be flashing bright red for someone like Michelle Rodriguez.
Oh, definitely.
She starred in massive franchises like Avatar and Fast and the Furious. But her relationship with the law has been relentless. The source breaks down her 2003 record. She faced 8 separate misdemeanor charges for driving incidents in a single year, including a DUI and a hit and run.
See, 8 incidents in 12 months is not a streak of bad luck. It is a statistical indicator of systemic noncompliance.
And the consequences she faced were incredibly specific, too. For the 2003 charges, she pleaded guilty, received 48 hours in jail, 3 years of probation, and was ordered to perform community service at 2 different New York hospital morgues.
That is a very intense sentence.
But the pattern didn't break. In 2005, she was arrested again for driving under the influence, spending 5 days in jail. And because that arrest violated her existing probation, she was sentenced to 60 days in jail, a 30-day alcohol rehab program, and community service for mothers against drunk driving.
And the B-Checks list reinforces this exact pattern of persistent minor offenses with reality TV star Stephanie Pratt.
Right. At age 20, she and a friend were detained in Oahu for stealing over $1,300 worth of clothing. Police also found illegal drugs in her purse, which led to charges for second-degree theft and promoting a harmful drug.
And then it continues years later.
Yeah, in 2009, she gets pulled over for tinted windows, which escalates into a DUI arrest and a sentence of 3 years probation. So I have to ask you, from an employer's perspective, why is a string of traffic tickets, DUIs, and petty theft considered such a massive threat?
It seems minor, right?
Yeah. Are they just bad drivers, or does wealth create this, psychological bubble where you genuinely believe the law is just a suggestion for other people?
It is absolutely the psychological bubble, and that is precisely what terrifies corporate compliance officers.
Really? More than a single major crime?
Often, yes. If we look at the mechanics of risk assessment, a single severe mistake from 20 years ago might be written off as an anomaly if the candidate has been perfectly clean since.
Right, the redemption arc.
But a continuous documented pattern of ignoring basic rules like speed limits, stop signs, or probation terms, that signals a fundamental disregard for authority and structure.
So it's not about the severity of the speeding ticket, it's about the refusal to comply with the system.
Precisely. In a corporate environment, a baseline refusal to follow rules translates to regulatory noncompliance, workplace safety violations, and massive financial fines. You can potentially rehabilitate a past mistake, but you cannot build a functional corporate team around an individual who fundamentally believes the rules are optional.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. The pattern is the poison.
Which brings us to our final section of the deep dive. We are moving from persistent rule-breaking to crimes driven by sheer absurdity, and in one final case, immense weaponized privilege.
This is where things get really weird.
Let's talk about Woody Harrelson.
His file adds a completely different dimension to the concept of background vetting, particularly regarding family associations. Well, the sheer absurdity of his own record is wild enough. The source notes that in his younger days, he was arrested in 1982 because police found him stoned, literally dancing in the streets of Columbus, Ohio.
Just dancing in the street.
Yeah. He paid a fine to bypass jail time for disobeying state marijuana laws. Then jumped to 2002, and he is taking London police on a taxi chase through the city, eventually jumping out and fleeing on foot before being apprehended.
Which is wild. But there's a darker layer to his file.
There is. The BChex article drops a detail that completely reframes his background. Woody Harrelson's father was an organized crime hitman who was actually convicted of assassinating a federal judge.
And this brings up a critical mechanism in executive-level background screening. When companies run deep dive checks for C-suite executives or high-level hires, they don't just look at the individual's direct criminal record, they run association checks.
Wait, so if my father commits a crime, a corporate background check holds that against me. How does a compliance department justify looking at family history?
Well, they aren't holding the father's crime against the son in a legal sense. They are assessing the environmental risk and potential points of leverage.
Leverage, like blackmail.
Exactly. An immediate family member, deeply embedded in organized crime, introduces serious vulnerabilities regarding blackmail, extortion, or corporate espionage. The screening company maps out the candidate's proximity to severe criminal networks to ensure the corporate entity isn't inadvertently exposing its operations to external threats.
So it's literally about mapping the radius of the blast zone. That is incredible.
It's all about mitigating external risk.
But if Harrelson's file is about the environment you emerge from, the final celebrity on the BChex list is about the environment you try to purchase. We have to unpack Lori Loughlin and the Varsity Blues scandal.
This is perhaps the ultimate manifestation of the BChex warning regarding facades.
She pleaded guilty to conspiring to get her daughters into the University of Southern California. The mechanism she used was paying $500,000 to have them added to the USC crew team, despite the fact that neither daughter had zero experience in the sport of rowing.
Zero experience, just bought the spot.
Yep. She ultimately served a 2-month prison sentence and completed 100 hours of community service. We've gone from dancing stoned in Columbus to dropping $500,000 to construct a fake rowing resume. At what point does a background check stop looking for physical danger and start screening for a complete detachment from reality?
Well, it screens for both. But Loughlin's crime represents a distinct, highly elevated threat level for employers.
More elevated than the others.
In a specific way, yes. The other celebrities on this list committed crimes and subsequently hid them behind a successful public persona. Lori Loughlin utilized immense wealth to actively manufacture a fraudulent history. She wasn't just hiding a past. She was purchasing a synthetic reputation to maintain an elite societal image.
So she built a fake foundation from scratch.
Yes. And for a background screening company or a corporate HR department, the well-funded active fabrication of credentials is the ultimate red flag.
Because you can't trust anything they say.
Exactly. If a candidate is willing and able to synthesize their academic or professional history, every single piece of data they present is fundamentally compromised. The liability isn't just what they did, it's the fact that you can no longer trust anything they claim to be.
Fabricating the past to protect the facade. That really brings this entire journey through the B-Check source material full circle. We have explored the massive, often shocking gap between the shiny, curated Hollywood veneer and the stark reality of a criminal background check.
It's quite a gap.
We looked at the risk-reward math that allowed Will Smith's assault charge to be swept away. We examined the algorithmic liability of the heavy crimes behind Mark Wahlberg and Robert Downey Jr.'s redemption arcs.
We really ran the gamut.
We did. We pierced the squeaky clean brands of Tim Allen and Piper Kerman, decoded the persistent noncompliance patterns of Bill Gates and Michelle Rodriguez, and finally looked at the synthetic realities purchased by Lori Loughlin.
And honestly, it serves as a potent reminder of why continuous safety monitoring and deep background screening exist in the first place.
Absolutely.
While the general public can afford to laugh at a bizarre taxi chase or, happily buy a ticket to see Iron Man, everyday businesses cannot operate on blind faith or PR spin. They rely on accurate, historical data to protect their ecosystems from the very real behavioral, financial, and compliance liabilities that are so easily concealed behind a polished interview or a charming smile.
Which leaves us with one final, slightly unsettling thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. Think about the most trusted, successful, and polished person at your workplace right now. The one with the flawless resume and the perfect corporate demeanor. If a comprehensive, continuous background check were run on every single person in your office tomorrow, including you, wait, let me rephrase that without the pause. If a comprehensive background check were run on every single person in your office tomorrow, including you, whose facade would crack first, and would your company be as forgiving as Hollywood?